Hello, welcome to Conscious TV. I'm Iain McNay, and today my guests are Camilla Carr and Jon James. Hi guys.
Hello.
Hi there.
And they have written a book called The Sky is Always There, Surviving a Kidnapping in Chechnya, which came out a few years ago. I discovered this book quite recently and I found it an incredible book because they were basically kidnapped, as the title says, and they were held for 14 months in very difficult and trying circumstances. And we're going to not just look at the story and the drama of the story, but also how they coped in these very difficult situations through the tools they had, which was their meditation, their Qigong and their Tai Chi, and I guess their common sense to a large degree. So let's find out first a bit about you guys before you went to Chechnya and you were kidnapped, just to get a feel of what your lives were like. So you, I think, Camilla, you actually started to meditate with your mother when you were like 10, 11 years old. It was a kind of a very early start to... Am I right there in terms of my...
Yes, I was interested in these things. I was intrigued, and I know she started yoga when I was about 9 or 10, and I remember she bought this mandala, and I remember staring into the mandala and just being as quiet as I could, and at other times I would just sit quietly, silently. But then, you know, and I remember looking down at my arm thinking, gosh, you know, my arm feels like it doesn't belong to me almost. It's detached, you know, that kind of strange sensation.
But how did you respond to that at such a young age, having this feeling that your arm doesn't belong to you?
I don't know, it made me sort of feel quite peaceful, and also a sense of excitement. I also remember thinking at a young age, there is something beyond words, but words can be quite limiting, and it used to frustrate me because I hated being misunderstood. I probably still carry that, actually. I hate being misunderstood. And so, you know, I felt there's more to communication than just words. So, yeah.
And then, at 12 years old, you first had a session in the work of Douglas Harding by Richard Lang and his brother David. Do you want to explain briefly what that work is? Because it is quite a fascinating tool.
Well, at the time, we knew it as headless. The
headless way.
Yes, yeah. We were headless. And we would do these experiments. I remember one was literally just putting a coloured spot on your forehead, and we were in a circle of people, and then you would count the heads, and then you would count the spots, including your own. You realise it didn't correlate. There was a, you know, because you couldn't see your own head.
Yes.
And so suddenly I thought, gosh, that is bizarre, and yet we all, you know, experienced that same thing. And we used to do like pointing at the carpet and describing it, pointing up through the body, describing it, and then you move your finger up, and all I can see is a finger and a hand, and it's not a face at all that is obviously is there in some way, but it was this feeling of, whoa, you know, space. I mean, out of which we are, in a way. So it's a more different way of looking at yourself.
And realising what you think you are isn't quite what you may really be.
No, it's kind of two-way. You are that face in that mirror, because that's what other people, you know, tell you are, and you can see it for yourself. But you are also much greater, you know, and it has so many implications, but at that age it was just like, it made me laugh out loud, and I just thought, oh, thank God. You know, it's like, I don't have to be just little Camilla, you know, I'm part of the universe, I'm part of everything. We're all connected. And the fact that, you know, that I'm talking to you now, and I'm only aware of your head, your face, and, you know, I mean, there's nothing here in a sense. And so it's not head to head, it's not face to face, but it's face to no face. And that means that you know, you can go beyond conflict.
You can go beyond conflict.
Yeah, because it's not like it's not a face-on situation. You know, suddenly you're leaving a space where the other can exist, or the same for the other way. And you know, it made sense to me, and I thought, well, maybe that's a way through our incessant kind of, I don't know, attention to conflict, I suppose, in a way.
Okay, well, we'll come on to obviously the conflict you faced later on. So, Jon, just to get a brief feel of how it was for you when you were younger, I think from what you were telling me earlier that a significant thing was you working, I think, as a builder, and you had a back injury, and it was through that you started to experiment with Tai Chi and Qigong, and you found a different way of not only understanding your body, but beginning to understand life as well.
Yeah, I injured my back, and well, the medical profession just said, sorry, we can't help you at all, and I had a lot of pain there. And I discovered Tai Chi, and it was a very gentle form. I think it was the Li family form. And so I started going along to the weekly class, and slowly over several months, my back got much better. And then actually over, I guess, for quite a few years I continued, because I found it fascinating. And so it's like a great exploring myself from the inside. So using the Tai Chi, because that's how it was taught. It's like, okay, you have to get to know your own body, your own energies within your body, all your organs, to get to know how they feel, and then you can start feeling outwardly. So you know how you feel, and then you can start feeling out to see how other people feel. And I just found that fascinating and amazingly calming at the same time. And then after a couple of years, my teacher said, oh, well, now we can move on to Kung Fu. So we went from learning to be soft, to understanding the hard. And the first time I went to the Kung Fu, it really, really frightened me, because you could actually cause so much damage to another individual with just one strike. And so I backed off for a while. And then after a couple of weeks, it soaked into my mind, okay, maybe I'll try it again. And then I went along, and then I understood it in a larger way, I guess. And for me, the Tai Chi, the softness of the Tai Chi coming into the Kung Fu made the Kung Fu so much more powerful, softer, but almost equally as lethal. And I've got this sense of, like, as a way of a warrior. It's like you, how can I say it? Is that you felt this power in yourself, and you knew you could do so much damage, but then a huge amount of compassion would come through, and you wouldn't want to cause that much harm to anyone. And that's how it felt for me. So I guess it was, I don't know, like there's the samurai way, you don't draw a sword unless you're going to take blood, cause injury with it. And that's how I felt with the Kung Fu. It's like, well, you never want to harm anybody, but if they want to harm you, you defend yourself, and it's up to them.
Yeah. It's interesting, because you hear many stories of people doing the Kung Fu and then going into the softer things like Qigong or Tai Chi or Qigong, but it's rare that I hear someone that's gone the other way around, from Tai Chi to the martial arts.
But actually my teacher did say it was much harder to come from hard to soft. Once you've learned the hard way, the hard arts, and obviously in some of the arts they're thinking doing all sorts of crazy stuff, smashing bricks and hitting lumps of wood and all sorts of things. Once you've made yourself hard like that, how can you get soft? So it was coming from the soft to the hard to understand that.
Okay, so, and then obviously you guys met and got together, and then obviously a lot happened. We can't go into all the details now, but in 1997 you had this invitation to go to Chechnya, where you were going to work with traumatized children, because obviously there was a war going on there between Chechnya and Russia, and it was a lot of orphans and kids that have gone through horrific things. So what was the motivating factor that you wanted to go there?
Do you know what? It's almost hard to describe, but I remember, you know, meeting Chris in that cafe.
So explain to
Chris Hunter is a great friend of ours,
Right.
and he was working for the Quakers in Moscow at the time. This was 1995, 96, and the war had been going on, and he produced these horrendous photographs out of his pocket of some of the atrocities that had happened. I'll never forget that. But then it was the way he just turned to us and said, look, now is the time we can set up a permanent centre for the children in Grozny, and do you want to come and help? And I literally felt this kind of thud in my heart, and I thought, yes, I do. And I sort of turned to Jon, and he was nodding. And then, you know, and then you're thinking, well, we've got jobs and families, you know, and then I'm saying, well, Chris can't do anything for 6 months. And he said, well, I haven't got any money yet, and needed to get thousands of dollars. And, but I think, you know, as time went on, we started gathering things for the children, and it was also, you know, our thoughts about how we could help them began to develop, and a lot of that I remember in my own teenagehood getting involved in dance and dance drama stuff, and I found it brilliant for my confidence, and I knew that kind of thing was good, and somehow instinctively I knew that if you're been in trauma, well, you stiffen up, you know, and you need to find ways of releasing the trauma out of the body. And so we had decided then we would use all the expressive arts with the children, and we would use counselling, group counselling and individual counselling.
So something deep down in you was wanting to really help
Absolutely.
people.
I think you felt the same.
I think for many years, actually, I had my mind that at a certain point in time I was going to do something, but I wasn't quite sure what that something was. And then at this meeting with Chris, and he said, you know, I'm inviting you to come down to Chechnya to set up this centre, and it just felt like a big yes. You know, my being just said yes.
Because it was a very brave decision to make in a way, because you decided to drive there, and that was a whole adventure in itself, and you knew you were going to a war zone and the unpredictable could happen. So it took a lot of courage on both your sides to do that.
Courage, madness.
They're close sometimes, aren't they?
Close.
Yeah.
But I mean, Jon is a good mechanic. That was why.
So you knew that if the car broke down, it'd be okay.
Well, I guess we had a lot. We had a larder, and they're pretty indestructible, and we proved that because we did try to break it a few times on our way down.
So it's ironical you're going through Russia and you're buying in England a Russian car.
I know. Actually, I never asked Chris why. Really, and I was thinking I haven't. Why we had to buy it in England and drive across, but at least we could fill it with all the things we wanted for the children.
Anyway, that's an adventure in itself, and people that want to know more can obviously read the book, which is quite compelling once you start reading it. And as I say, a lot happened on the adventure down there. You got down to Grozny, and then you were met by people there, and the first few days were very rewarding, weren't they? Working with the children, you had a kind of a school building, I think it was, and you had. Well, describe what happened and how it all worked.
Yeah. I mean, we well, first of all, we did have 2 armed guards with us because there was a risk of kidnap, but no one was kidnapped at that time. We kept a very low profile. You know, I went to the bazaar once, and then they said, you look too foreign, so we had to stay in the house, which we shared with 10 people, and then go off to the centre every day and work with the kids and back. Oh, it was fantastic. I mean, you know, I will never forget the first day that the children came off the bus and just looking into their eyes, and you really could read the horror in their eyes. And some were very agitated because their nerves were damaged. Some were mute because, again, the same thing. They were traumatised.
Well, they couldn't speak, you mean?
No, they would not speak. They were like this.
Wow.
They wouldn't speak. Some of the older boys, teenagers, very angry. You could just feel it, you know, in them. And we did a lot of sport as well. And we had a very full programme, and did a lot of dance, which is part of their culture, and anything, you see, again, to help release the trauma. And we did a performance at the end of each week, and that was brilliant for their confidence, and they loved doing that. So it was very rewarding. You actually saw the changes. You saw...
And quite quickly by the sound
Quite
of it.
quickly.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Well, there was two particular little chaps. I don't know how they couldn't have been much more than 9 or 10, I guess. And so they were almost opposites. One was a little bit hyperactive and just couldn't keep still, and the other one was pretty quiet when they first came. And within 4 or 5 days, they were actually talking and playing together. So they both, one had calmed down a little bit, and the other one had woken up a little bit. So we were getting this balance was coming back. And at the end of the week, when we were doing the performance thing, whoever was the guardian to the child, because quite often these children were left with cousins because family members had been killed, they would come along and they actually told us, little guy, he never used to talk at all, and now he's actually talking to me again. Or this one used to hardly slept because they were getting nightmares, but now they do sleep. And that was just in a very short period of time, so we were getting really good feedback pretty quick.
I mean, one thing we had started doing was teaching them some Qigong and visualisation. And that visualisation particularly to help them if they were having nightmares, sort of take them to a safe place to imagine it. And that was working. That was really good.
And then in the middle of one night, you were some armed men came into the room where you were sleeping.
Yeah.
Just describe how you first felt when you realised you were in danger.
Well, we heard these angry voices beyond the wall, middle of the night, knew something was up, sat up in bed, looked around to our window, which had bars on it to keep us safe, but we couldn't get out. And then the door was kicked in, a flaming bit of paper was thrown in, and I just remember thinking grenade, and this is it. But it wasn't. It was followed by a masked man, all in black, carrying a Kalashnikov, and he was shouting, "Documenti, documenti." And that was when Jon started giving him the passport. And I was actually shoving mine onto the bed because it had some money in for the children. So, but I think they were both crystal clear in that moment.
Yes, I think we both sort of clocked that, okay, this is dodgy territory we're going into now. So we just I don't know, we just got really calm. Both of us became calm and
thinking what we'd need.
Well, that's fascinating. So you're in this really dangerous situation and you become calm inside.
Very calm at that moment, and also I think that's probably partly shock, when you're like this. But I mean, I immediately thought, washed things by my bed, chucked them in the bag, loo rolls, sanitary towels, because I had my period at the time, and I picked them up and I held them onto the nose of the guy, and I said, "Okay." Duh, he said. Now, I was lucky that he knew what they were, because it was taboo to talk about that kind of thing. And I just shoved them in. But then they got very excited because they found a safe in the next room. So they came running in saying, "Kluchi, where's the key?" And then Jon found the key. And
I went out and opened the safe, and it was full of foam-coloured balls that we bought for the kids.
So we were kind of even smiling a bit at that moment, because we knew they hadn't got what they wanted.
Yeah.
And then they led us out.
And you were taken to what you call in the book the black hole of Calcutta, which is your...
Well, I think we just called it the black hole.
No, I called it the
black hole.
Oh, did you?
Calcutta, yeah. So you were living there
came to me.
underground in a fairly confined space.
Yes, I mean, that was... well, those first few moments were very tough, in the blackness. And then they handed us a stub of a candle and a blanket smelling of urine and started pointing to this hole in the wall. And we kind of crawled through there, and then there was this other room which you couldn't even stand up in, so that the single sun lounger. And our minds started going around then, what will our parents do and all this, they're bound to want money. And then my stomach started churning, and of course there was no bucket. And so I knocked on the trap door, and it opened, and there was a muzzle of a gun about there. And I'll never forget this moment. I just looked up into the eyes of the guy that was holding it, and they were blank. And I knew then that if he didn't like what I said, he would just pull the trigger, because he was so divorced from his humanity, from his emotions. And but I had the dictionary, so I started speaking very fast. Voda, pожалуйста, menstruati. Anything so similar. He continued just to stare down at me. And then another guy came in, a bit agitated. grabbed the dictionary, ran off and came back with a pink plastic jug of water. So that's what we had that night. But John found a cardboard box and a plastic bag, so that's what we used. But we knew we had to start a dialogue with these men to make them see that we were humans and not just commodities to be exchanged for money.
Well, one of the things that comes out more and more as you read the book, as I read the book, was how traumatized these guys were. And the way it started off, they were the perpetrators and you were the victims. But you seem to realise more and more that the real victims were themselves, because they were so messed up and they'd lost their family members and just been living in terrible conditions. So that was an interesting realisation, wasn't it, over time you had?
Yeah. And it was important to hear their stories and to really understand where they were coming from. And I mean, they were, and you know, it became more obvious as time went on, as you say. I mean, at first we thought, well, we're doing quite well, didn't we? Really, until I was one day sitting in the kitchen with GA, someone we called Guardian Angel, who's the first one that spoke to us, and he picked up a bread knife and he grabbed me and he had the bread knife at my back and he was trying to kiss me, and I was just saying, "Niet, John, mi amor, John's my husband," trying to stare him out but pull back, and he couldn't hack it and he did back off, but he got me to scrub the floor on my hands and knees until there came a point when I was getting more worried because he was getting bored, so I just said, "Chai, tea?" "Da," he said, and that's when we sat down and I turned to him and I said, "Mieux te siestra, I'm your sister," and he nodded and I knew he understood. But that, you know, I went back to John and I just said, we've got to be so careful.
Yeah. So you made this decision to follow the line of least resistance with them, to cooperate as much as you could, and you, as you say, you started a dialogue, but all you had was a dictionary because you didn't speak their language and they didn't speak English. So that was hard, wasn't it, to have a dialogue when you're picking words out of a dictionary? It
was, but GA was very good at mime. And we sort of,
really?
He was brilliant at mime. We really, you know, we did go through whole scenarios of his war and through his mime. And HC was pretty good with the dictionary. But the other two guys that didn't really want to engage with us, talking-wise.
So how was it? So you're kind of waking up in the morning and, you know, I won't go into the details, but the toilet's basically a bucket in the corner and your bed was often just a mattress or a rug on the floor, so you were in very basic conditions. But the worst thing of all, of course, is you're confined, you can't get out, you have no idea of your future, if you have a future. So how did you use the tools that you'd learnt?
Very early on. Do you want to talk?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was really glad that I'd done my Tai Chi and my yoga and things, and meditations in many forms, and I actually done some Kundalini yoga as well, so a lot of breathing techniques as well there, and pranayama as well, I guess, from the Indian tradition. So, yeah, I think very quickly we evolved. I think we ended up calling it a prayer circle. We developed this practice, and it evolved out of what would be the pipe ceremony from the Amerindian tradition. And I had participated in several pipe ceremonies in the past, but I was really bad at remembering things. And so one thing I did remember from one of my teachers was, you don't need to have tools as such, physical stuff. You can just draw on it from the mind. So I said to Camilla, "Oh, look, in my pocket I've got my pipe, and we can do this pipe ceremony and we can make it our own, because that is the way it would be, because I can't remember." So then we started off with this pipe ceremony, and then it over the weeks, over the months, it evolved. And essentially we started inviting, I guess what we call the angels, or the healing powers, from like the four directions, from the north, from the east, the south and the west, and sort of made a little pyramid of where we were and established the centre. And we knew that lots of people will be thinking of us, and we also knew that we'd been in several groups. We've been in Sufi groups, I've been in Druid groups, I've been with shaman groups, pipe and drum ceremonies and such. And so we knew that all these people would be thinking of us, and we also knew there was one particular group that Camilla's mother ran every Wednesday morning. So we knew that group would certainly be focused on us and sending their prayers and thoughts to us. And we just believe that that love goes through walls, and love can travel great distances and through all things. And so we just invited those thoughts to come to us, that were named to us, and brought it into that space that we created. And then we actually, in our minds, we placed the guys who were holding us in that circle as well, because the only way to get free is for them to understand.
Yeah.
And so we needed to send healing to them.
Yeah.
So we were getting prayers sent to us, and then we were giving it, hopefully sending it on out.
And did you feel that had an effect on them? Was there anything that changed in them that you recognised that might have been from your attitude and your healing circle?
I think so. I mean, I certainly think it was probably the difference between us being alive now and being dead. You know? I mean, they were very sensitive because they were traumatised, and that opens up your sensitivity anyway. So, I mean, I'm sure it had an effect. I mean, on the converse side of that, if I tried to kind of peek a look out of the window behind the blankets and things, you'd be sure that the next minute they would come into our room, they'd undo our room and they'd go around like this, and then they'd go, and they couldn't see through the wall, but they kind of guess things.
So this is the ironical thing, you're becoming more and more aligned, and that has its pluses and possibly its minuses as well, because they're reading you better.
Yes.
Absolutely. You had to keep, and that was the thing, we had to keep alert 24/7. But also every day we had to kind of forgive the day before to allow ourselves to actually feel the possibility that they would be good to us today. Because you never really knew, And
They were, I think, they were smoking cannabis, weren't they? I don't know if it was these guys at one point.
One of them was, one or two.
So that, again, doesn't help with stability. It might calm them down short term. It doesn't really help with their overall stability.
No, that was one we called handcuffs, because he put them on every time we moved. Yeah. Now, he definitely, and he did go a bit doolally towards the end.
And they were wearing masks when they came in to see you. You didn't see their faces to begin with, did you?
No, for a few months, quite a few months, until a very memorable time
because we actually moved to different places we were held, and then we were in this one particular place, and there's the one we called GA, and we were sat as close as we are now across the table, and he just peeled his mask off one day. So I'd gone from just seeing some eyes and this black balaclava, and he pulled it off, and there it was. There was his face, and I was struck by. I couldn't quite work out if it was if this is good news or bad news. I couldn't work out if they trusting us enough to actually reveal their faces, or they got to the point where they don't care because we're going to be shot. So, but I did say thank you, and I felt this energy rush out from my heart as I said that, because I felt honoured that he trusted me enough to reveal his identity, as it were. And I actually saw him squirm in the seat, and he felt really uncomfortable for a little while.
Yeah.
And
so for them to experience being vulnerable was very difficult, I would guess.
Oh, extremely difficult. Yeah, extremely difficult.
And then over the, I'm not sure what period, the next couple of weeks, slowly, the four that were holding us at that time all removed their masks.
Because they were asking for $1 million ransom for you, weren't they?
Yeah. I mean, HC actually drew on a bit of paper, because we asked him. He drew a gun and a tank. He put $50,000, and underneath...
$500,000.
$500,000. I knew I had it wrong.
Get your mask.
$500,000.
You're worth like $50,000.
Yeah, at least. And underneath, $500,000. And then a school and a hospital. So they saw themselves as freedom fighters, not rebels.
Yeah.
And in effect, I think they were both, you know, really, because, I mean, because of what they got involved in. But they sincerely thought they were doing it for the good of their countrymen and their country.
It's so fascinating that they're thinking they're doing the right thing in the way that you were thinking you were doing the right thing by coming and helping their children in terms of working with their trauma. I wrote down certain things from the book which I wanted just to mention briefly and see what you have to say. You used to go for walks in the forest in your minds. I thought that was wonderful, how you would pretend you were walking in the woods somewhere and describe things to each other.
Yeah, well, it was extremely important to get us out of that box or wherever we were, and taking each other to the sea. I remember, and to the forest and places we'd been to. I mean, there was one particular place in India, Mount Abu, that I took John to, and actually after we were released, we went to that place. And it was on top of this mountain, these rocks where you could just sit and look out miles below. But it was a key thing to do, to keep sane.
And you also used the power of silence quite a lot. You talk about in the book too, how you just were able to use this thing called silence.
Yes, I think well, it was very necessary, wasn't it, really? It was very necessary for us to find our own space within that small space. With each other, and then when there were three of us later on, because of this Russian Valentin Vlasov joining us for 5 months, and I mean, I do remember one time just going deeply into silence, and I went so deeply wherever I went that I suddenly got shocked awake because the captor came in with some food, and I thought, I haven't been here at all. I don't know where I've been, and that was really bizarre.
And then, basically, you got raped, didn't you, by one of the captors? Something happened, and you were punched and handcuffed, and he raped you more than once.
Yes.
That just must have been, it must have been terrible, absolutely
yes,
terrible.
I mean, this guy called Paunch, who, again, I think it was because we hadn't even been released, and they were thinking we were going to be again. They get bored, and he's an opportunist, but he was a thug. You know, he didn't really. I couldn't talk him out of it like I could with HC, because he tried it on a bit too, and GA a bit. But when it happened the first time I was raped, I did take my mind away. You know, I just thought, you can never ever harm my spirit, my soul, and I still believe that. But of course, it has an effect on you. It's a huge violation. And it was equally as bad for John, because he was manacled to a radiator and he couldn't get free, he couldn't help me, and he knew what was happening. But John was really wonderful, because he didn't show how upset he was or his anger. He just listened to me afterwards, and really that's all I needed, someone to listen.
The quote in the book that I wrote down was, when it happened the first time, "He can never touch the essence of me. My body is only a part of who I am. My spirit will always be free." And that's a wonderful attitude to have, and obviously it was only partial insofar as you still had the human, emotional, traumatic thing, but even to hold that partially is incredible in that situation.
Yes, and I think probably my very early experiences of headlessness, the headless way, or or just exploring what it is to be conscious, that helped me in that moment.
And then for you, John, it's also very, very difficult. The woman you love is being raped. It's terrible.
Yeah, I was aware that I couldn't protect her any other way. You know, I couldn't move. I mean, obviously later on I went through a whole loads of scenarios in my mind of things I could have done. But at that point I thought, okay, I'm chained to this radiator, and all I can do is pray that this happens, swiftly. And then I quickly thought, it's amazing how fast the mind runs through the scenarios, and I just thought, okay, well, I just need to be here for Camilla when she comes back. I need to support her, because that's all I can do. That's all I can offer.
Yeah. I almost don't know what to say in that situation. You're very brave, and your openness is also wonderful about it. Yeah. And of course, it went on some other times. Yeah.
And I mean, because we didn't know if, you know, we actually talked about telling the other guys, because we thought, God, they'd be shocked, you know. They might be, and then we thought, no, it might end up being gang rape, you know, you just don't know. So that was when we thought, no, show least emotion. Until it got to a point, we were in another house, and coming into winter now, and we were in the kitchen. It was Jon and me and Puppy Dog and Paunch. And Paunch went into a neighbouring...
You give them all these names, Puppy Dog.
Yeah, Puppy Dog.
You did.
And Paunch. He had a glass eye, by the way, but we thought we'd be kind, so I called him Paunch. But anyway, Paunch went into a neighbouring room. He called me in, and he was lying on a mattress, exposing himself. Now, I'd never had an open door, and, you know, I felt strength that the others were there. I knelt away from him, and I burst into tears, because I was at the end of my tether, and I just said, "Niet, niet." And he looked surprised. And then a bit later, I walked back into the kitchen. Later, he called me out with the dictionary, and he said, "Pachimu," why? And I pointed out, no sex, no violence. And then he looked at me and he said, "But you, Western woman, free sex." And that was because all he knew about Western women was watching these crappy films that we had to watch them with them. And, you know, all about hostage taking, and they were American and British films, and, you know. But then it was so extraordinary, because I looked at him again and I thought, oh my God, he wants me as a friend. And it was like a light had switched on in his brain. And he called me out, but he never touched me again. He called me out to talk about his dreams of having a market garden and a four-wheel drive. Now, so I felt so lucky at having that confrontation, because it's very few people in my situation have that opportunity, and it meant that I could start my own healing process. And knowing where he was coming from, which of course was a place of ignorance, where abuse always comes from. Understanding that, but then working through my own fear and my anger, a lot of which I couldn't deal with till after I was released, but my tears, you know, I could go into the tears. Until I really feel now, you know, if you walk through that door now, I wouldn't want to hit him or anything. I wouldn't even shout. I'd just say, did you know what effect you had on another human being? I want you to understand.
Yes. And of course, you understand more and more your captors as well, which must have been such an important part of the process, because you understood what they'd gone through in terms of the trauma and difficulties and everything. So it's a two-way thing in a way, isn't it? And I think you do. I mention this now because you talk about this in the book, about how important it was for you to understand their situation.
Absolutely. Yeah. But it does not condone what they were doing.
No, I get that completely.
No, but some people get confused by this.
Yeah.
And they also see a kind of forgiving way of being as a weak way, and it's not at all.
Yeah.
It takes more courage to be like that.
Yeah.
And I think it's incredibly necessary. You know, it's like, because it opens your heart with compassion. And what can we do without compassion? You know, none of us, I mean, we all have this good and bad in us, because that's how we are.
So, the last 4.5 months, you stayed in a place that you called, I forget what you called it now, but there's this another term that was fairly derogatory about the accommodation.
Well,
the King's Chamber.
King's Chamber. I thought it was pretty good.
Well, yes, but it didn't represent something that was very nice. And you had some company then, didn't you? You had this. Tell us about Valentine, who was your company the last few months.
So, so we're in this. We called it the King's Chamber because, for me, it sort of reminded me of the images I had of the Egyptian tombs inside the pyramids. You know, through tunnels and things, and that's how we got to this place. Probably through a cellar of a building, down a hole, crawl through a tunnel, back up through another hole, entered into this concrete box, which was just about 2 meters by 2.5, and only just a few inches above my head. No natural light at all, and metal bars around the hole we came up through, so that you came up through a hole, and then you had to go through a gate which was locked. And then we had a milk churn, which was our loo, and there were 2 beds and a small table and a couple of chairs. And we'd only been there a couple of days, and we called him an elder, and he obviously wasn't. He had grey hair, and he came to us and he said, "Oh, you're going to have a guest." And we thought, how can we have a guest in this very small space, and it's only got 2 beds? But that night, sometime, Valentine arrived with a black eye, and he was wearing combats, but obviously like 3 sizes too small, and flip-flops, obviously not his own clothes. And he introduced himself as special police. But later on we discovered he was Boris Yeltsin's special envoy to the North Caucasus. And so for the next 5 months, all 3 of us lived in this little concrete box. And I think we were slowly starting to go through the seasons, so we were starting to go towards summer. And down there in the Caucasus, summer gets to over 40 degrees centigrade, which is 100 and whatever it is Fahrenheit. So we were in this box that was pretty darn hot. And our breath was sometimes condensing on the walls and just trickling down. We actually asked for a fan to try and keep us a little bit cooler. And the electricity used to go off now and again, so we'd be in total darkness, and we'd have to resort to the small candles which we had.
The interesting thing for me, or one of the interesting things, was that Valentine watched you do Tai Chi fairly early on.
Yeah.
And here was this, from what I understand, a very macho Russian, a very important Russian, as you say. He was Yeltsin's special envoy, so he was very well respected in Russia.
Sure.
And here he was in prison with you guys, watching you do this strange thing I guess he'd never seen before, called Tai Chi. And he asked you after a time, didn't he, how you do it? And you were teaching him Tai Chi.
We were, particularly some of the Qigong moves, really, more than... Because Tai Chi, the whole form that he's, you know, and we taught him certainly some Sufi breathing to calm him down. And,
Yes.
And he was a very good pupil, wasn't he, John? He did, he learned quickly. He was aware of how he was surviving, that was the thing. He realised it was good stuff.
And it was very valuable what you taught him, because he probably wouldn't have survived, because he was being aggressive towards the captors to start with.
Right at the beginning,
yes.
Right at the beginning, and we were furious with him, because, you know, they could stop feeding us or do anything, really. And they did get angry, and they did take away certain gifts they'd given us, like some nail scissors and things like that. But they still fed us, and eventually everyone calmed down. And actually it was quite fascinating, because he was the same age as the elder, pretty much mid-50s, and they started talking through the bars. And the elder would say to him, "So why did you bomb us? Is it our religion?" And Valentine said, "Niet, niet, dengi." And so the Chechen really respected him, because he was telling him the truth. And they ended up playing chess, didn't they? One day they brought a chessboard in, and they were both playing. And we were watching this, and we realised they were both trying not to win. That was hilarious.
Yeah. And they actually ended up respecting each other, you say in the book as well.
They did respect each other.
And for me, that's another wonderful example of how people who are enemies, they're put together in these circumstances where they have to be together and they have to relate. And somehow they realise they could be friends. That's the extraordinary thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So after a time, another 4 or 5 months, it starts looking so you may get released. I know you'd had false alarms before, but how was it this time? I know you had a lump underneath your arm, which you... Just take us through that, because that, again, that's... here you are, you feel you're getting maybe something quite serious wrong with your body. There's no doctor, no medicine, nothing. And you have no sunlight either. You're in a chamber underneath it on false light.
Yes, yes. I got an infection in my by my fingernail, and then it developed into this lump under my arm, and we'd been in about 7 or 8 months now, and I just thought, my God, this is the end. You know, my father had died of cancer, so I immediately thought cancer, and I had to use the power of healing through myself, you know, and I, you know, I do believe in that, and I was just sort of holding my hand over the lump and pouring in, asking for healing energy to come from the universe and just pour into my system. I mean, eventually it did go down. I mean, I had another infection which was to do with the rape, and that was my groin, and so I had done the same with that. So I know it helped. I mean, it's... I mean, I actually have cancer now, so who knows? You know, that might have been the beginning, actually. But, you know, damage limitation, you can't always do so much.
How were you? You know, we've talked some about the tools that you had during the time there, the Tai Chi and the Qigong, the meditation, the prayer circle. You used to also do a smile meditation, some energy. Tell us about the smile meditation.
That was a key, absolute key. And this came from Mantak Chia, that we'd both first come across it. And I was teaching Tai Chi before I went in, so I used to teach it. But it's basically just smiling within your body. And you smile into your eyes, and then you smile into your face, and you smile down into your breath and into your lungs. And I mean, he had a specific, fairly short version, but we developed it, and so it encompassed everything, smiling into your hair and your nails. And we did tell Valentine this too. We said it really keeps you healthy, you smile into your body. And I still believe that today. I probably should do it every day now, but I don't.
But how was it? Were you feeling you were getting to the end of your tether, or you feel you could have gone on longer, or do you not know how it would have been? Because it's getting nearer your release, you get more kind of clues, not clues, but signs.
Well, it was you never had signs actually. You never really. I mean, the only thing was had a proof of life video one night, and and quite soon after that, Jon then decided to shout.
Okay,
you had your outburst. That's right.
Yeah. So we've been in. Well, yeah, we've been in. I don't know how long. Well over a year now, and we were in the last place we were in, concrete box, really, really hot, and I wasn't doing too well with the heat, and it's probably emotional stuff as well, you know, pressure building up in my head, and I felt like I almost felt like I was growing horns. I was getting so hot, you know. So, and I turned to Camilla one day, or one evening, I guess it was, because we had no concept of time really, because we had didn't know what time of day it was really. I assumed it was night time, and I turned to Camilla and I said, I've got to shout, I've got to let this pressure out of my head. And he said, it might look like I'm out of control, but I'm still in control, but I'm just going to let this stuff out. So I started screaming, shouting and swearing, and I was really going for it. You know, I was really crying as well. You know, my nose was going for it. Valentine tried to calm me down a bit, but I just had a good swear at him as well, because he couldn't understand what I was saying. And within about 5 minutes or so, I could actually hear someone coming through this tunnel, and then this elder from the place came, and he just said, Jon, what do you want? What's the matter? And they just said, well, I want my freedom. You know, I want to go home. And he started offering me different things. You know, like, I'll bring you some fresh juice. And I said, no, I don't want fresh juice, I want my freedom. And he went through a few more things, and eventually said, but how about BBC? And I said, yeah, I'll have BBC. And over the whole period of time that we've been held, several times they said, we can get you this, would you like this? And we said yes, and it sort of never materialised. But the next day, this shortwave radio arrived, and we managed to find the BBC World Service, which was like knocking a hole in the wall and putting the window in. And so we started listening to what was happening in the world, and we started getting back up to speed. We actually found out what was going on in the world, listened to the news, and a few weeks later, there was this proof of life, and the proof of life was a video. And again, we didn't know what sort of time of day it was, and they just, I'm guessing it's sort of about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. So we've been asleep for some time, and then somebody pops up into your room and puts a camera in your face, light on, speak. And you're like, what? You want me to speak? And prior to this, they'd always been very strict about what we said, and they'd actually written a script or made us write a script, and they just said speak. So we had, so we spoke to the camera, and then so after we got the radio, I think it was about 2 weeks after the radio, we were listening to the World Service one day, and we heard our own voices on the BBC World Service, and we thought, wow, something's connected, something's got out there. And it was less than 10 days after that, I think, that...
when the elder came in, and he said, Demoy, Demoy, and we were thinking, here we go again, packed our plastic bags. And then he said, so sincerely, he just said, Demoy. And then I thought maybe he means home. And we sort of continued to keep our precious possessions. Were taken down through the tunnel blindfolded and led off to a car, and we were driven out of Chechnya to a 5-star hotel in Chechnya. And all we wanted to do was be outside in the fresh air. But of course we couldn't. But they led us up into a room, and there was a balcony, and we just stood there watching as the dawn lit up the mountains, and then the sun began to rise. And that was just the most magical sunrise of my life.
And then you met Boris Berezovsky?
Boris Berezovsky.
Who's one of the Russian billionaires, and he had brokered your release, it seems.
Yes.
Even though no money changed hands, I think. Is that right?
He said that no money changed hands, but of course we think it did.
Oh, okay.
And, but it was wise to say it didn't, because it made it harder for people still in captivity. Because if it had happened to us, some people were released for millions when we were in, and they got very angry. So
and you flew to London in his private jet.
Yeah, he lent us his private jet. So we went from a cellar to gold-plated taps. And
wow.
Pretty well. So yeah, sort of, two ends of, we drove into Russia in a £500 larder and came out in a £10 million
jet. Well, we're going to actually have a kind of part 2 to this programme, because we're going to be joined by Christine Jensen for a part 2, who's a trauma therapist, and just look at your adventures, so we say, after you got back to London, because I think the first few days you were living on adrenaline, weren't you, and you weren't too bad, and then reality set home in terms of home literally in your bodies, and what you'd gone through and what you had to go through in terms of dealing with the effects of it. But one thing I'm going to ask you to do is, before we finish, is you have a lovely poem at the end of this book Thich Nhat Hanh has written. It's just 4 lines. If I can ask you to read that.
Yeah, okay.
This is the last page, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cheers. Well, I'll start it with the line before, I think.
Okay.
Because it's something that I think... We are all the same at heart, so why not try and walk and touch peace every moment? Walk and touch happiness every moment. Each step brings a fresh breeze. Each step makes a flower bloom. Bring the earth your love and happiness. And that's Thich Nhat Hanh.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank you for being so courageous and telling your story so honestly, and I think it will touch many people. And I think it's also wonderful, the tools that you learnt really probably was the only reason you survived, because I think if you hadn't had those, you'd have probably gone crazy early on, I would guess. But I don't know. But
yeah, one never knows.
Yeah, you never know till you
don't know,
till you're in it.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the things that I think I surprised myself about, the things that you learned. You draw on those and you go, oh wow, that's good stuff. I'm glad I spent that time doing that. And
also one last thing I thought was so interesting was that when you came out, you saw reality quite differently, didn't you? Because you hadn't been used to seeing anything more than 2 yards in front of you before.
The horizon was very small.
Yes.
So it appeared like everything was sort of cardboard cut out on that vertical plane for a couple of days. But that then sort of merged down. But it was this sensory overload was huge, wasn't it? It's extraordinary, because we were used to taking our time talking and leaving a space for someone else to answer. And out here it was like...
Yeah. Okay, we'll go into this more in part 2. So thank you very much for coming along to Conscious TV.
Thank you.
I'm going to mention the book again. The full title is The Sky is Always There, Surviving a Kidnapping in Chechnya. And thank you for watching, and hopefully we'll see you for part 2. Goodbye.
Camilla Carr and Jon James were kidnapped from a compound in the Chechen capital Grozny. Until now, their supporters have relied on behind-the-scenes diplomacy. Now they're being supported by the former Beirut hostages, Terry Waite and John McCarthy.
They gathered at St James's Church in central London, some with their own memories of being held hostage, all determined not to give up hope for the 2 British aid workers missing in Chechnya since July the 3rd. For their families, these are difficult times. They've had no hard news since the kidnapping, but still believe the couple are alive.
They've been missing since the beginning of July, and it's been a long, hard 5 months. But we haven't given up hope, and we're very positive that they will be home.
It's been several months since you heard from John, but you still obviously are here with great hope today.
Yes, indeed. Yes, we're hoping they could be out by Christmas, but I doubt this very much now. It's too near to Christmas.
Jon James and Camilla Carr left their home in the Forest of Dean in April this year. Both had a history in the care sector, but nothing could have prepared them for the shattered remains of Grozny. They worked at this rehabilitation centre for children traumatized by the war, until they were seized in the early hours of the morning by 6 masked gunmen. Before today, the couple's families had followed Foreign Office advice not to seek publicity about the case. But quiet diplomacy has so far not worked.
It is normally a very wise policy to follow that line initially. But there does come a point, and when you say, well, perhaps now by taking a higher profile, we'll have a new breakthrough. And I think that point is right.
If they get any hint that we're all gathered here today and launching a campaign and holding a service of hope, that will give them, Camilla and Jon, a huge amount of support and encouragement to keep going.
Whether today's message gets through to both hostages and kidnappers in Grozny is perhaps doubtful. For now, though, it is the best hope. Jeremy Cook, BBC News.
For Camilla Carr and Jon James. The couple come from Ross-on-Wye in Herefordshire. They've now been missing for about 5 months, but until now the family have decided not to draw attention to what has happened in case that should hinder any negotiations there might be with the kidnappers. Well, that policy has changed now, and earlier today the family held a news conference to draw attention to the couple's plight. Although little has been reported, the fight to free the couple has had high-level support. Former Beirut hostages John McCarthy and Terry Waite today joined their family, along with Michael Penrose, who was himself held in Chechnya for a month. Camilla Carr and Jon James, here seen shortly before the kidnap, have been working with deprived children in the former Russian province. Last July, they were taken from their home in Grozny by 6 armed men. Apart from one brief message in September confirming that they were safe, the family have heard nothing. They say there has been no ransom demand. Today, they decided to draw the media's attention to the case in the hope that this will help to get the couple freed.
It's because we were really giving every chance we could for negotiations to go on quietly behind the scenes. And after these many months, nothing appears to have happened, although not for the want of trying by many, many different departments and people out there on the ground, and the Foreign Office and government officials locally, and nothing is happening. So we feel we need to raise the awareness.
The former hostages said they hoped news of the campaign would reach the couple in Chechnya. They said one of the worst things for them could be not knowing what was happening back in England.
Perhaps now, by taking a higher profile, we'll have a new breakthrough. And I think that point's arrived. That's the main point.
What is the problem? Is it simply there's no government to negotiate with?
Well,
the situation there is completely anarchic. The 80% of Grozny is destroyed. The local government is trying to restructure itself, but with what?
The couple met in Herefordshire, where they took classes in martial arts. Tonight, at a special church service, prayers were said for their safe return. There was also a message from Tony Blair, read by the Foreign Office Minister, Baroness Simons. The family have made no criticism of official attempts to free the couple. As they approach their first Christmas as hostages, they hope news of the campaign will reach them and bring them hope.
It's the middle of August, and we loved your letters, the ones from the end of December, and they still really give us a lot of joy to read, support. We'd love to have some more and some photos, if you're allowed to send them.
Yeah, this is the first time I've spoken in a normal voice as well. I've been told to whisper for the last year, so if I sound a bit different, it's because this is the first time I've used my voice at this volume. We're eating well. It's pretty hot where we are. We have no windows.
But we have a fan.
And we would like some more letters, and maybe even a newspaper or a book.
And much love. Love to all of you, especially to Ashok and Ben. And maybe they could write too. That'd be good.
Please don't make it too much longer. Don't know how long I'm gonna stay sane.
But we will.
And we have a shortwave radio. Now.
So we listen to the World Service. Keeps us sane.
I hope this video reaches you with good quality, because the man's forgot to switch the light on. I think that's all for now. Can't think of anything else to say.
Lots of love. And we pray that it's soon. Remember to smile. Keeps you healthy.
I'm Jon James, and as you can see, I'm still alive. I'm still wanting to come home pretty soon.
I'm Camilla Carr, and yes, I hope to be free very soon.
Now, please make this the last video we have to do. Please send us a newspaper or a book or something. We have nothing to read or any pictures to look at.
And we love you all very much. Give you all every day.
excuse us, we just woken from our night's sleep.